Well, the Mariners still haven't done anything. Is it time for them to pivot? And pivot to what exactly? We'll discuss that and more coming up here on Mailbag Monday. Colby, hit it.
You are Locked On Mariners, your daily Seattle Mariners podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Ahoy, sailors. It is Monday, December 16th, 2024. This is Ty Gonzalez and Colby Patnode for the Locked On Mariners podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today, we'll be opening up the mailbag like we do here every Monday. But before we get into your Mariners questions, shout out to our title sponsor today, Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the promo code Locked On MLB. That's LOCKEDON MLB for $20 off your first purchase. And if you want to hear from me and Colby even more and help support the show, check out our Patreon. All you have to do to check that out is click the link in the description of this episode. So we are officially into our winter schedule. So for the next couple of months, until pitchers and catchers report, we'll be posting 3 shows a week here on Locked On Mariners instead of the typical 5 that we usually do. Those episodes will release on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, and our CTZ Patreon episodes have been moved to Tuesdays and Thursdays. So if you didn't know, now you know. All right, let's get into your questions. Bryce wants to know, do you think the Mariners take Tyler Bremner or Jamie Arnold, who Joe Doyle mocked to the Mariners, and make the big trade of one of the non-Castillo starters next offseason? Evans and Morales might be ready by then as well.
First things first, obviously a lot can change between now and draft day. Guys we're not even thinking about. I mean, there might be a new number 1 pitching prospect by the time the Mariners come to draft. But yeah, Arnold and Bremner are both pretty special guys. So I think what's most likely to happen here, I mean, the Mariners are going to take the best player that they, whoever they grade out to be the best player, they're going to take that. I don't think they're going to do anything, funky with the slot value and try to, I don't think they're going to do that. I mean, you if everything goes well this year, you're not going to pick in the top, 20 next year. And your goal is to never pick in the top 5. So yeah, this is a gift that you've been given. You have to take advantage of it. And so could they take Bremner or Arnold? Sure. Yeah. If they have them as, one of the 3 best players on the board and they're there, then yeah, they absolutely could and should. Like, this is not a time to be like, well, they've taken, they need a third baseman. So they kind of have to force a third base pick at third base. Like, no, that's not what happens in the draft. You take the best player you can. And with Bremner and Arnold, you get a couple of guys, both those guys, probably in the big leagues, by 2026. Like, in theory, those guys could pitch in the big leagues in 2025. Like, that's how good they are. So yeah, it's a very interesting situation. I don't think they take a guy just so that they can trade one of their pitchers that they have now, right? They're not going to be like, well, we like Arquette more than Bremner, but we want to trade, Logan Gilbert this winter, so we're just going to take the pitcher instead. I don't think that's happening. I think they're just taking the best player that will take the money that they're offering. So yeah, I don't think that I don't think the two are necessarily connected. Is it a happy coincidence that you have an opportunity to take a guy who probably slots in as a mid-rotation starter, like as 21 years old? Yeah, that's a nice little bonus, and obviously it's something to consider. But I don't think they're like pushing those guys up their board so that they could trade Castillo or trade Gilbert or whatever. I think that's just going to end up being a byproduct of taking the best player you can. And there's a shot those 2 guys go 1 and 2. So you might not get that opportunity. But right now, based on what we can tell, both of those guys, at least mid-rotation. Arnold is a lefty who gets Chris Sale comps. That's pretty interesting. And Bremner is a guy with 2 elite pitches from the right side, who's a good athlete. They both throw a ton of strikes. Bremner has probably the best changeup in this entire class. And he throws, 95 miles an hour. So with a pretty good slider. So yeah, both of those guys are really good. But I don't think the Mariners are going to value them any higher than they already would, just under the thought process that, like, oh, now this allows us to trade Gilbert or Kirby or anything like that.
John hates the Mariners, which is not just this person's name, but also just a factual statement. With Nico Horner now unlikely to be traded, do you guys think they target Willi Castro more heavily, considering he can play second or third any given day? And with them saying they aren't sure about paying a 34-year-old Christian Walker $20+ million, do you think they target Yandy Diaz more heavily now? I think they should. I like Yandy Diaz. Depends on what the Rays want, but I like Yandy Diaz. And it depends on, what the Twins want for Castro and what they're doing, because the Twins are weird. They're looking to sell. They're not going to add payroll, but also it doesn't seem like they're going to trade Carlos Correa. So they probably should still try to compete. Castro would help them do that. And I don't know if there's a major leaguer that the Mariners have that the Twins would want, that the Mariners also feel comfortable trading for 1 year of Willi Castro. So, I'm interested in both of those guys. We've talked about Castro a lot on here. Yandy is someone that I really like. He was, I think he made it on my top 5 trade targets list when we did that on Top 5 Tuesday a long while ago. But it just depends on what these teams want, because seems pretty clear to me that the Mariners are hitting some brick walls on the trade market with what they're willing to offer.
Yeah, it's interesting. The Mariners were in on Diaz last summer, right up to the deadline. It doesn't sound like they were ever the favorite to land him, but they were in the mix, certainly. And this is after they acquired Randy Arozarena, so I continue to kind of think that the whole Randy and Diaz can't coexist together, blah 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 thing. I don't think that's actually a thing. Now we haven't heard the Mariners linked to Diaz this year or this winter, as far as I know.
Yeah.
So that's a little bit interesting, because they've been linked to just about every other first baseman who has been available this winter. So that's interesting. Tampa Bay is also an interesting situation, because they just traded Jeffrey Springs for mostly prospects, but they did get kind of a reliever back, upside reliever. And so it does feel like Tampa also, they were willing to take pure prospects for Arozarena. So it does feel like the Rays are a team that is one of the teams that is still willing to take prospect capital, for their big leaguers. But they did also get a big leaguer back in the Springs deal. And
given the conversations that you've had with them, that should be a trade. If you are wanting to explore Yandy Diaz trade, that should be a trade that comes together relatively quickly. What they want,
sure.
What they like in your organization.
Sure. And maybe it's a 3-team trade where you trade Castillo for, this, and then you flip that guy over to the Rays for Diaz, I think the Rays are still interesting. I think, Diaz still makes a good deal of sense. I don't think that the Randy, Yandy thing is anything, honestly.
No.
I think that's an overblown.
And even if it is, work past it. You're major leaguers.
Right. They did it for 2 years.
You guys played together for a couple of years while this was apparently going on. So
right, without incident. Yeah. So at least on the field. It's just one of those things. Diaz would be a good fit. It still sounds like the Rays want a major leaguer and prospects. Well, again, if they consider Joe Boyle to be a major leaguer because he's pitched in the big leagues, then the Mariners certainly have guys like that. And then they could have prospects that they could throw out there too. So, I think the Rays still make a lot of sense. Diaz would be a fun target. It's weird that they haven't been – he's the one first baseman in the history of baseball they haven't been linked to this winter. And then, Willi Castro. Again, that's all about cost. The Twins are the one team that's been quieter than you've been this winter. And they didn't do anything at the deadline. They didn't do anything last winter except for, trade away Jorge Polanco. So they're very much at their cap, at their payroll cap. So I would imagine Castro is not going to cost all that much. If they could save a little bit of money, maybe it's a Trent Thornton for Willi Castro type. They save a little bit of money. They get a major leaguer, blah, blah, blah. So I think both of those are good, pivots, if you want to call them that. And I would probably rather have Diaz than Walker, depending on.
Yeah, because we're talking about 2 years of Diaz, and one of them is an option at $11 million.
I think it's 10 and 15 or something like that. Yeah.
And then, or give a 34-year-old $20 to $25 million a year for the next 3 or 4 years.
Right.
Yeah, that's a no-brainer to me.
Yeah. So, yeah, I'd rather have Diaz than Walker anyway. So, yeah, I think those are both, good pivots. And I would really like, and the Rays seem like one of the few teams that will take a prospect heavier package than other teams. And so that to me just makes a tremendous amount of sense.
Yeah. All right, we are going to answer more of your questions here in just a moment. But first, a reminder, this episode of the Locked On Mariners podcast is brought to you by both FanDuel and SelectQuote. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers can bet $5 and get $150 back in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. The World Series, the Super Bowl, the Olympics. The world's top athletes get to play in these top-level sporting events thanks to one thing: teamwork. And teamwork can also protect your financial legacy and your family's future. SelectQuote's licensed insurance agents are the perfect teammates when shopping for customized, affordable life insurance. They can find you the right policy to keep your financial legacy safely in your family's end zone. SelectQuote is one of America's leading insurance brokers with nearly 40 years of experience, helping over 2 million customers find over $700 billion in coverage since 1985. Other life insurance brokers offer impersonal, one-size-fits-all policies that may cost you more and cover you less, while SelectQuote's licensed insurance agents work for you to tailor a life insurance policy for your individual needs in as little as 15 minutes. SelectQuote. They shop, you save. Get the right life insurance for you for less at SelectQuote.com/lockedon. Go to SelectQuote.com/LOCKEDON today to get started. That's SelectQuote.com/lockedon. And you're listening to the Locked On Mariners podcast. It is Mailbag Monday. We're answering your Mariners questions. Jeff wants to know, of the teams interested in Willi Castro, which one would offer the Mariners the best deal? To me, it's the Cubs, because they have the infielder that the Mariners apparently covet, and they also have some interesting back end of the rotation pitchers that could also be included in the deal to help you kind of offset the loss of Castillo, at least a little bit, right? But yeah, the Ken Rosenthal article that came out a couple days ago makes it sound like Hoerner's no longer a possibility because of the trade of Isaac Paredes. Now, is that just posturing on the Cubs side? Who knows? But it's possible that that's now dead for the Mariners. But yeah, that's the one team that to me made quite a bit of sense, that lined up pretty well on a Castillo deal. Everyone else, though, that's been mentioned publicly, at least, doesn't make a ton of sense for me. Like Red Sox a little bit, but we went through this last week when we talked about all the teams that were mentioned. Like the
Mariners
Orioles
really don't like Casas, then the Red Sox don't really make that much sense.
Yeah. The Orioles, who's the headliner? Again, the Mariners have, I mean, the Rosenthal article laid it out. The Mariners feel like they are only going to trade Castillo if that deal makes them better, or at least sets them up to be better.
Right. For 2025, not just for the future.
Yeah.
I'll throw this out there about the Orioles. I thought of this weekend.
Okay.
Colby Mayo, which again, we've talked about, that's a bit of a risk, but what if you also get Cedric Mullins? So like you have one guy who's like a floor player, who's probably a platoon guy, but whatever, he helps. And then you have the upside play, Mayo.
Now that eats into the money that you save.
Right. It's about $9 million. So you would only be saving about 15.
But so would Hoerner, right? Hoerner would also eat into that money. So, a couple of other guys that we've talked about as well.
I do feel like if Castillo is traded, which right now I'm at about a 50-50, like a true 50-50.
Mm-hmm.
it's probably going to be to a surprise team, like a team that we're just like, oh, wow, we didn't even talk about them. So maybe it's like I don't know, like a Detroit. Maybe it's like I don't know, Arizona or something like that. So
if it was Detroit,
mhm.
it'd have to be Kerry Carpenter, right? We know they love him.
The players I am fairly confident the Mariners have attempted to acquire from Detroit over the last few years are Kerry Carpenter and Parker Meadows. Now, Meadows isn't good enough to be the headliner.
That'd be hilarious after what Parker Meadows did to this team last year.
Yeah. He's not good enough to be the headliner, but he's, pretty good. Or he's, pretty good secondary piece. Yeah, it'd probably have to be Carpenter unless, the Mariners really like Jace Young. But again, that's kind of the Colby Mail thing where it's like, we hope this guy helps us this year. We're not really 100% sure he will. So yeah, and that's kind of what you run into with all Castillo trades. It's like they have a headliner, but it's like kind of an unproven major league guy, like who you still like the upside of plenty, sure, but and so Detroit's semi-interesting, but again, I kind of run into the same problem I do with Baltimore, where it's like, is Carpenter even a headliner? A platoon bat, a really good one, but
strong side platoon, but
it's Luke Raley,
Well, and also, he doesn't play a position that you're right now, by all accounts, looking to address.
Right, and even if he like Cedric Mullins, for example, he's also an outfielder. Right, but Cedric Mullins is a plus base runner and a plus defensive player. He can play all three outfield spots at a well above average clip. Kerry Carpenter is corner outfield only, and
should just be a DH.
Right. Yeah. And he's a platoon DH too. So, is that enough to headline? Probably not. It's probably a situation where you need co-headliners. At which point is Detroit just out? Like they might not even just want to trade Kerry Carpenter for him straight up. So. I think a lot of teams are like that. They have a headliner, either he plays in the outfield, which the Mariners don't really need, or he's not a proven player yet, so you kind of feel like you need more there. And so that's why I'm a 50-50. But I think the Castillo odds are probably 50-50. And in terms of who's the best fit, it's tough to say because it does seem like the Cubs and the Red Sox were the best fit, but obviously things have changed since we first heard about this.
If the Cubs are out, then it's probably the Red Sox.
But if the Mariners don't like Costas, I don't see the path to a deal there.
Yeah.
So I think, again, at this point, it's probably a player that we've either – or it's probably
if the Mets actually want to trade Mark Vientos, then that's probably the team.
Right, and you do that in a heartbeat. But, they also have, they have McGill, who they could give you, and they have maybe Peterson, who knows? They might actually be able to give you an arm back too. So, but I would still say the Cubs and the Red Sox until we know that they're not in it. And then I think the good old fashioned mystery team is in play here. And I still think the best way for the Mariners to extract value from Castillo is going to come via a 3-team trade, but we just kind of have to wait and see.
We're going to answer more of your questions here in just a moment. But first, a reminder, this episode of the Locked On Mariners podcast is brought to you once again by Gametime. So I used to live in New Mexico, and down in New Mexico, there are 0 pro sports teams, and a lot of bands and artists that I listen to skip going there more often than not. So when I moved to Toronto, where there's a baseball team, a basketball team, a hockey team, even a soccer team, and there's great music being played every night in the city, I was right in my element. When I want to catch a ball game or my wife and I want to see a band, I always get my tickets through Gametime. And that was the case well before Gametime sponsored our network and before I even joined the network, because it is truly the best ticketing service out there, hands down. I truly believe that. And now it's getting even better thanks to Gametime Picks. Gametime Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. I can just go on the app, it'll show me the best deal right away, it'll show me the exact view I'll have, and most importantly, it'll tell me exactly what I'm going to pay with Gametime's all-in pricing, so there are no annoying little fees that pop up at the last second. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the promo code LOCKEDONMLB, that's LOCKEDONMLB, for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem promo code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? Gametime. And you're listening to the Locked On Mariners podcast. We are wrapping up Mailbag Monday with a couple more of your questions. Keto O'Rourke wants to know which of the next 3 seasons, so 25, 26, and 27, would give you the highest odds of success, or would you give the highest odds of success given current contracts and upcoming prospects?
I mean, that order.
Really?
I mean, because I'm not going to sit here and pretend like Colt Emerson is going to come up in 2026 and be Julio Rodriguez. For all we know, the prospects aren't any good until 2028, if they're ever any good. And how many of them have to be good? Right now, you still have, Gilbert and Kirby and Cal and, you still have those guys. And that might not be true in 26 or 27. So I think and the closer we get to 28, the more likely it is 1, 2, or all 3 of those guys are on a different team. And I'm not going to bank on Harry Ford being as good as Cal Raleigh. I'm not going to bank on, whoever Logan Evans to be Logan Gilbert. Absolutely not there. So I feel 25 is their best shot. 26 is their second best shot. And by 27, I think by 27, one of Gilbert, Kirby, or Cal is definitely gone. And maybe 2 of them. And at that point, there's a couple all-stars I have to replace. And I don't trust this team to spend the money to keep them or replace them. So, I think this is your best shot, unfortunately. And they're, because ownership won't let them, they're not acting like it is. I mean, 23, 24, 25 should have been their go-for-it window. And they, screwed around and they lost 2 of those 3 years. So I think this is it. After this year, you're going to have to start making some really tough decisions, particularly about Gilbert. And then the next winter, after that, it's probably going to be Cal and Kirby. I mean, at some point, if your ownership's going to pretend they're a mid-market team, you got to do the things that mid-market teams do, unfortunately, and that is trade guys at their highest value. You get as much as you can out of them to help you, and then when their value's at their peak, that's when you trade them and you try and recreate them. And you try and do that, and you hope it doesn't blow up in your face.
Yeah.
So, I feel like the order is as it's laid out.
If you guaranteed me no trades of those guys by 2027, I might say 2027, because you are going to have an influx of a lot of talent. Because we're talking about, Cole Young and potentially Harry Ford this year. Colt Emerson probably at some point in 2026. The number 3 pick, whoever that is. Laz possibly. Michael Arroyo possibly. There will be a lot of guys that at least give you options. But a couple of these guys are going to get traded. So it's probably this year, because you know what you have this year. Mm-hmm. And that's what makes this offseason so frustrating.
Yep.
Last question of the day comes from Matthew. When would you guys move on from someone you don't think you can sign an extension to? 3 years like Logan has, 2 years like Crochet in Chicago. Let them play most of the contract in 1 year like Tucker in Houston, or play it out and have them leave as a free agent, offer the QO, and get the draft pick. Depends on the player, but also, like you mentioned, if you are a mid-market team, it would behoove you more than other organizations to try and trade these guys, get what you can for them, and then try and recreate them, essentially.
Right. And here's you trade, Crochet gets traded with 2 years left, and people think okay, well, if you trade Logan Gilbert next winter, that's what he's going to be worth roughly. Maybe, but also Gilbert will at that point, assuming he finishes this year healthy, Gilbert is going to have at that point 5 seasons of track record that says, that he's this good and this is his level. Whereas Crochet's had 1, right? So it's one of those things where it's entirely dependent on the player. I think the earliest I would ever consider trading Logan Gilbert is next winter. But if they want to hold on to him and they like, because you're still going to get quite a haul for 1 year of Gilbert, but you're going to get more at 2 years of Logan Gilbert. And there's a tipping point to me where it's like, I don't think what you can get for 3 years of Logan Gilbert is going to be significantly more than what you can get by trading 2 years of Gilbert. So keep him and try it again.
Yeah. Well, if you're looking at 1 year of Gilbert, it's probably something close to what the Brewers got for Corbin Burns, which was Joey Ortiz and DL Hall.
Yeah.
And didn't they get also a competitive balance pick?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah.
That's not bad. But like if you trade him with 2 years left,
yeah,
you're probably getting, twice that. So
yeah.
So Gilbert is the guy I would trade next winter if I'm. And the other thing too here is that like this is why you should be trying to figure out an extension now, right? You need to start having those talks right now so 2 years out, 1 year out, like, hey, how realistic is this? Because if you can sign Gilbert to an extension, that should be your priority. Like far and away, that should be the priority, is to get Gilbert signed long term. If you can't do that, then I think next year. But a guy like Cal, he probably makes more sense to just roll into his free agency and put the QO on him and try and get, because I don't think you're going to replicate the value that he gives you in a trade. I don't think you're going to find that. So I think, and by the way, Cal probably gets less valuable the closer he gets to free agency because he has more wear and tear on his body. And so I think, Cal, I would probably just play out the line with. If I can get him to a team friendly extension, fine. But I'd probably just let him walk and slap the QO on him and thank him and, still try and re-sign him, but let him test free agency. Gilbert, Kirby, I'm probably going to do the same thing I do with Gilbert. So it really depends on the player. But I think like just trying to factor in like keeping your window open and maximizing trade returns and all that stuff. I think trading a guy when he has 2 years left, so the team acquiring him gets 2 full seasons. I think that is the optimal time to trade most players.
It's going to be fascinating to see how they maneuver this. And we don't even know who's going to be the one pulling the trigger on that.
Nope.
So, yeah. We'll see. All right. Well, that's going to do it for our show. Thank you so much for joining us here on the Locked On Mariners podcast. For Colby, Pat, Node, I'm Tight Gonzalez. Be sure to give us a follow on Twitter at LO_Mariners. You can follow me at Tight Gonzalez and Colby at CPAT11. That's CPAT11. We're also on Blue Sky. You can follow me at TDG, Colby at MLB Colby, and the show at Locked On Mariners. Have yourself a beautiful baseball day, and we'll see you next time. Peace.